For this project, we're going to be exploring chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro is a method of applying value to a two-dimensional piece of artwork to create the illusion of three-dimensional solid form. It's essentially shading in the most basic way of describing it. You're shading on a two-dimensional surface, which is your flat piece of paper, or in our case, we're going to be using Scratchboard and making it look like a three-dimensional solid thing. This way of working was devised during the Italian Renaissance and was used by artists such as Leonardo da Vinci and Caravaggio. This is a painting by Leonardo da Vinci made during the Renaissance. One of the goals of Renaissance artists was to create a sense of realism. One way they did this was to utilize perspective, which you can see in the background. You can see that the rocks, some are closer and some are really far away. Another way was to capture accurate, realistic lighting. So if you look at each of these figures, these people, you can tell the light is coming from the left, and they're consistently all shaded the same way. So if you look at the detail image on the right, this lady's face is lighter on the left and then shaded and rounded, and you can tell the light is coming again from the left. Other artists that utilize chiaroscuro are Albrecht Dürer on the left, a German artist known for his printmaking and etchings, and Caravaggio, an Italian artist, on the right. In this system, if light is coming from one predetermined direction, then light and shadow will conform to a set of rules. Typically in chiaroscuro, we really only see one source of light. And if that source of light hits the object from a particular direction, you should be able to predict how it's going to fall across the object. So we've done this with shading before. There's a highlight, typically where the light will hit first on a rounded form like this sphere here, and then it'll sort of diffuse as it curves around the surface all the way to the right, where you'll see a shadow, and then there's a cast shadow that ends up being on the ground, which is stretched out and elongated, and then we'll have some light bounce up from the actual table, will bounce up back up onto the underside of the object. So when we talk about chiaroscuro, it's really a very dramatic lighting setup, like this particular lady. She has the light coming from the upper right. You can clearly tell that. And we tend to see images look like they're emerging from the darkness. There's usually a lot of dark, and that's what we'll also be using in our Scratchboard projects. Hatching and cross-hatching. What is hatching? Hatching is an artistic technique used to create tonal or shading effects by drawing closely spaced parallel lines. Typically, you're going to use hatching with something permanent. So you're not going to be blending with a pencil. Instead, we're actually going to be using pen. Hatching is when the lines go in one direction and they don't ever cross. To get darker values or darker shades, you can cross-hatch or put the lines closer together. And the more you overlap the lines, you should get darker areas. And the closer the lines get will also create shading or darker areas, darker values. You can also apply this to rounded surfaces. And the last artist we're going to look at is Mike Lyon. He's a contemporary artist that creates drawings using pen and ink. Pen is a permanent material that is not erasable. One of the things Mike Lyon does is create a lot of texture using these pen marks. When you go close up, you can actually see there's a tight sort of curly patterning to a lot of his work. And sometimes he incorporates a little bit of color. This is the artist all the way on the right. There's a lot of detail in a lot of the portraits. And again, a wonderful texture, all done with pen. . These are a few of these Scratchboard examples. Scratchboard, essentially, it starts out black, and you scratch away the black layer to reveal the white. Scratchboard is essentially the opposite of using pen and ink. First, we'll be practicing with pen and ink on paper, and then eventually you'll do the same technique, but it'll be reversed on your Scratchboard. So let's practice some hatching and cross hatching before we do that.